The story opens at the Intergalactic Unity Summit on the neutral station Haven's Rest, where humanity's finest representatives mingle with delegates from allied species to negotiate trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Among the human delegation is Captain Dominic Kane, a decorated war hero whose reputation precedes him, military genius, skilled diplomat, and possessing the kind of classical good looks that make him the subject of endless media attention and romantic speculation from both humans and several alien species. He's grown weary of the attention, the assumptions that his appearance defines his character, the way people see his face before they see his achievements. The summit includes representatives from the Silvari Ascendancy, an elegant species whose culture places immense value on physical perfection and aesthetic harmony. Their delegation is led by High Minister Terran, whose flawless features and graceful bearing embody everything their society prizes. Also present, though notably segregated from the main Silvari group, is Kaida, a Silvari woman whose face bears severe scarring from burns, the result of a military action years prior where she saved her crew from engine failure at tremendous personal cost. In Silvari culture, such visible scarring represents profound shame. It's seen as disruption of the aesthetic harmony they believe reflects inner spiritual balance. Kaida has been effectively exiled by her own people, permitted to attend only because she possesses technical expertise needed for the treaty negotiations, but socially invisible and treated with cold courtesy at best. The chapter establishes the dynamic. Dominic watches the way Silvari delegates literally turn away when Kaida enters rooms, how they arrange seating to avoid proximity to her, how they speak about her in third person even when she's present. He sees her technical brilliance dismissed because her appearance supposedly reflects spiritual corruption. During a formal reception, Dominic observes Kaida standing alone at the periphery while other Silvari mingle and form social connections. Her isolation is absolute, not just from her own people, but from humans who don't want to offend the Silvari by associating with someone they've rejected. Dominic finds himself watching her not with pity, but with growing respect for the dignity she maintains despite being treated as invisible. When a Silvari delegate makes a particularly cutting remark within her hearing about the tragedy of marred beauty, Dominic sees her flinch but maintain composure, and something in him crystallizes into determination. The chapter builds to the summit's formal unity celebration, where delegates traditionally acknowledge partnerships, both political and personal, that strengthen interspecies bonds. It's ceremonial rather than legally binding for most species, but for the Silvari, public acknowledgement carries the weight of the right of union, an ancient custom where choosing someone publicly before witnesses creates sacred bond. High Minister Terran is expected to announce formal courtship with a politically advantageous Silvari noble. The ceremony proceeds with predictable formality until Dominic does something unprecedented. He steps forward during the human delegation's acknowledgement period and speaks in formal Silvari that he's clearly spent time learning. I acknowledge Kaida of House Varus, technical specialist and survivor of the Ethon crisis. I choose her as worthy of respect, admiration, and formal consideration for partnership. The hall goes silent. Every Silvari present freezes in visible shock. Kaida herself looks like she's been struck, her scarred features showing utter disbelief. And Dominic meets the stares calmly, having just invoked the right of union's preliminary stage before hundreds of witnesses from multiple species. The aftermath is immediate chaos. High Minister Terran demands audience with the human delegation's leader, his perfect features twisted with fury, barely contained by diplomatic necessity. Ambassador Chen pulls Dominic into an emergency meeting, her expression suggesting she's considering multiple forms of violence. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" she demands. "I acknowledged someone publicly, expressed respect and consideration for partnership. You invoked the preliminary stage of the Silvari right of union with someone they've socially exiled, someone whose scarring they see as spiritual corruption. Chen pulls up holographic displays showing Silvari cultural information. According to their customs, you've just stated formal intent to pursue bonding with Qaeda. She now has 7 days to accept or refuse. If she accepts, you'll be required to complete the rite, which involves public ceremonies, formal vows, and permanent bonding under Silvari law. I know. I researched their customs before making the declaration. Then you know you've just created an interstellar incident. The Silvari see Qaeda's scars as physical manifestation of spiritual failure. By choosing her, you're either making elaborate mockery of their rite or suggesting their entire cultural belief system about beauty and spiritual harmony is wrong. Ambassador Chen's voice rises. The Silvari delegation is threatening to withdraw from treaty negotiations. They're claiming you've insulted their culture by treating their sacred bonding ritual as a joke. I'm not joking, Dominic says quietly. I'm completely serious. Why? You've never even spoken to her. You're throwing away your career, damaging critical diplomatic negotiations, and potentially creating a permanent rift between humanity and the Silvari ascendancy for someone you don't know. Dominic is quiet for a moment before responding. For 2 weeks, I've watched Qaeda be treated as invisible by her own people. She saved her entire crew from certain death, suffered devastating injuries in the process, and her reward is exile and shame because their culture can't reconcile survival with their aesthetic standards. He meets Chen's gaze steadily. She's brilliant. I've read her technical papers. She's courageous. I've reviewed the incident reports from the Ethon crisis. And she carries herself with more dignity under constant rejection than most people manage under praise. Those are the qualities I actually value in potential partners, ambassador, not flawless features or political convenience. That's admirable but naive. You can't fix their entire cultural bias by making a romantic gesture. I'm not trying to fix their culture. I'm trying to acknowledge someone who deserves acknowledgement. Dominic stands to leave. I made my choice publicly. I'll stand by it regardless of political consequences. Meanwhile, Qaeda has been essentially confined to her quarters by Silvari delegation leadership. High Minister Thuron visits her personally, his disgust barely masked. You will refuse this human's declaration, he states flatly. You will make formal statement that you recognize his acknowledgement as culturally ignorant mistake, not genuine intent. You will release him from any obligation the preliminary rite creates. And if I don't? Qaeda asks, her voice steady despite trembling hands. Then you confirm yourself as spiritually corrupt, someone willing to exploit a foreigner's ignorance of our customs for personal gain. You'll be formally exiled, stripped of House Varys affiliation, declared outcast in permanent terms rather than the temporary disgrace you currently endure. Thuron leans closer. You think this human actually sees you as worthy. He's known for beauty and perfection. He's likely making political statement or conducting some human social experiment. When he learns the full weight of the rite's obligations, he'll find excuse to withdraw. And you'll be left with nothing, rejected by both your people and his. After Thuron leaves, Qaeda sits alone trying to process what happened. She pulls up recordings of Dominic's declaration, studies his expression for mockery or pity and finds neither, just calm sincerity that terrifies her more than cruelty would. She spent 3 years being treated as shameful burden, convinced her scars define her worth. Now the most celebrated human warrior has publicly declared her worthy of respect and partnership, and she has no framework for understanding why. Through unofficial channels, a sympathetic human technical officer named Marcus who doesn't care about interspecies politics, Qaeda learns more about Dominic. His military record shows repeated instances of choosing duty over personal glory, protecting subordinates at risk to himself, turning down prestigious assignments to stay with units that needed experienced leadership. His rare interviews reveal someone uncomfortable with the attention his appearance brings, who deflects questions about relationships by focusing on his work. The picture that emerges is of someone who values substance over surface, who has spent his life being judged for his looks and learned to look deeper in others as a result. The chapter builds tension as both human and Sylvari leadership pressure their respective parties. Dominic is offered multiple outs, claim cultural misunderstanding, say he was expressing general respect rather than romantic intent, accept that the Sylvari have different standards and withdraw gracefully. Qaeda faces increasing isolation even from the few Sylvari who previously tolerated her presence, with whispers that if she accepts Dominic's declaration, she's confirming she has no shame, no understanding of proper spiritual harmony. The preliminary rite period is 7 days. By day 4, neither has publicly commented on their intentions. On day 5, Qaeda receives an unexpected message from Dominic, not through official channels but through Marcus, their mutual technical connection. The message is simple. I meant what I said. Your scars tell a story of courage and survival. They're not shame, they're proof of strength. If you choose to refuse my declaration, I'll understand and respect that decision. But know that my acknowledgement was genuine, not political gesture or pity. You deserve to be seen for who you are, not judged by cultural standards that mistake aesthetic perfection for spiritual worth. Qaeda reads the message 17 times, her hands shaking, trying to believe someone could actually mean such words. On day 6 of the preliminary rite period, Qaeda makes an unprecedented request. She invokes the clarification protocol, an ancient but rarely used Sylvari custom that allows the acknowledged party to meet privately with their declarer to confirm intent before making public response. It's designed to prevent misunderstandings in the rite of union, though in modern practice it's considered somewhat insulting, suggesting doubt about the declarer's sincerity. High Minister Thuron initially refuses to grant the meeting, but Ambassador Chen surprisingly supports Qaeda's request, seeing it as potential path to de-escalate the situation if Dominic and Qaeda can resolve this privately. The meeting is arranged in a neutral conference room, with security present but maintaining distance to allow private conversation. Qaeda enters first, her scarred features carefully composed, wearing formal Sylvari attire that somehow emphasizes rather than conceals her injuries, a choice that speaks of someone who stopped apologizing for survival. Dominic arrives moments later, and when he sees her, his expression shows no shock or pity, just calm acknowledgement and something that might be respect. They sit across from each other, and the silence stretches until Qaeda speaks first. Why? Her voice is steady but edged with genuine confusion. You don't know me. You risk your career and damage important diplomatic relationships. You invoke our most sacred bonding ritual for someone your own people barely notice and mine actively reject. Why? Dominic considers his response carefully. I watched you for 2 weeks during this summit, watched how you carried yourself with dignity despite constant rejection, how you contributed brilliant technical solutions during negotiations and were credited in footnotes if at all. How you maintained professional composure when Sylvari delegates literally rearranged seating to avoid proximity to you. He pauses. I read the incident reports from the Ethon crisis. You stayed in a burning engine compartment for 17 minutes beyond what safety protocols allowed, manually rerouting power systems while your protective gear failed, because evacuating would have meant your crew died. You saved 43 lives at cost of severe injuries that your own people now treat as spiritual failure. My scars represent disruption of harmony, Qaeda says, reciting cultural doctrine by rote. Physical imperfection reflects inner corruption according to Sylvari belief. Your scars represent courage and selflessness. They're physical proof that you valued 43 lives more than aesthetic perfection. Dominic's voice is firm. Your culture's interpretation doesn't change the objective reality of what you did and what you sacrificed. Qaeda's composure cracks slightly. You don't understand. Among my people, I'm considered corrupted. Accepting your declaration means accepting permanent exile, formal rejection from House Varys, becoming outcast in official terms. Even those who tolerate me now will turn away completely. I understand you'll face serious consequences. What I don't understand is why your culture punishes survival and courage. Because physical form reflects spiritual state in Sylvari philosophy. Imperfection suggests spiritual disharmony that must have existed before the injury, otherwise, the harmony would have prevented such damage. She touches her scarred cheek unconsciously. They believe I carried hidden corruption that manifested physically through my injuries. That's circular logic designed to justify cruelty toward injury and disability, Dominic observes. If you died in that engine room, would they have honored your sacrifice? They did honor me, initially. Grand funeral was planned, recognition ceremonies prepared. Kaida's laugh is bitter. Then I survived. And survival with scarring was somehow more shameful than noble death. The ceremonies were cancelled. My family quietly requested I distance myself from House Varys to avoid bringing them dishonor. So dying beautifully would have been preferable to living scarred. That's not spiritual philosophy, that's aesthetic tyranny. Dominic leans forward. Kaida, I can't claim to understand Sylvari culture completely. But I know something about being judged primarily on appearance. I've spent my life being valued for features I didn't choose, having my actual achievements treated as secondary to my looks, being pursued by people who see aesthetic appeal rather than actual person. You were blessed by conventional standards. I was cursed by them. Both are prisons, Dominic counters. Being desired only for appearance isn't better than being rejected for its lack. Both reduce you to surface rather than substance. I learned to look deeper in others because I desperately wanted others to look deeper in me. He meets her gaze directly. When I look at you, I see someone who demonstrated extraordinary courage under impossible circumstances. Someone whose technical brilliance has contributed to this summit's success despite receiving no recognition. Someone who maintains dignity and professionalism despite being treated as invisible. Those are qualities I actually value: courage, intelligence, integrity under pressure. And my appearance, my scars, tell a story I respect. They're proof you survived something that should have killed you and came out strong enough to keep contributing despite rejection. Kaida is silent, processing this. Your people will judge you for this choice. Humans may not have Sylvari aesthetic standards, but you're celebrated for your appearance among your own kind. Choosing someone who your allies see as shameful will damage your reputation. My reputation is built on military achievement and diplomatic service, not on being considered attractive. If associating with you damages that reputation, the problem is with those making judgments, not with you. Dominic pauses. But I won't pretend there won't be consequences, for both of us. If you accept my declaration and we complete the rite of union, you'll face formal exile from your people. I'll likely face career setbacks and social judgment from those who think I'm making political statement or mocking Sylvari customs. Are you making a political statement? I'm making a personal choice based on recognizing genuine worth in someone others have dismissed. If that becomes political statement about the neutral territory, I've spent 3 years believing my scars define my value, being told by my own culture that my appearance reflects spiritual corruption, that I should be ashamed of surviving. Having that message reinforced daily through rejection and isolation. She turns back to Dominic. Now you tell me they represent courage and strength, that there's something to respect rather than hide. I want to believe you. But I'm terrified that accepting your declaration means trading one form of judgment for another. That you'll realize over time that aesthetic standards matter more than philosophy suggests. That you'll come to resent binding yourself to someone your peers see as shameful. Dominic stands as well. I can't promise I'll be perfect partner or that we won't face challenges. I can promise that my acknowledgement was genuine, that I see your worth clearly, and that I'm willing to complete the rite of union knowing the full consequences for both of us. He extends his hand, a human gesture. The choice is yours, Kaida. Accept or refuse. Either way, I respect your decision. Kaida looks at his offered hand for a long moment before tentatively placing her scarred hand in his. The touch is brief but significant, first genuine physical contact between them, offered and accepted without hesitation or disgust. I need time to think, she says quietly. The preliminary period ends tomorrow. I'll have my answer then. After she leaves, Dominic remains in the conference room, staring out at the plaza and hoping he's done the right thing, not just for himself, but for someone who deserves better than the rejection she's endured. The final day of the preliminary rite period arrives with tense anticipation from both human and Sylvari delegations. By custom, Kaida must make her response publicly during the summit's closing ceremonies, accept and proceed to complete the rite of union, or refuse and release Dominic from obligation. The ceremonial hall is packed beyond capacity, with additional observers joining via holographic link. Everyone wants to witness this unprecedented situation's resolution. High Minister Thuron has made clear that if Kaida accepts, the Sylvari ascendancy will formally exile her and lodge diplomatic protest against humanity for what they consider mockery of sacred customs. Ambassador Chen has warned Dominic that accepting the full rite will likely end his military career and damage his diplomatic standing. The pressure on both parties is immense. The ceremony begins with standard diplomatic formalities. Various delegates make speeches about unity and cooperation. Then comes the acknowledgement period where parties can formally respond to preliminary rites from earlier in the summit. Kaida is called to the respondents' platform. She stands before hundreds of witnesses, her scarred features visible to everyone, and the silence is absolute. I stand before this assembly to respond to Captain Dominic Kane's preliminary acknowledgement under the rite of union. She begins in formal Sylvari, her voice steady. By custom, I must either accept and proceed to complete the sacred bond, or refuse and release him from obligation. She pauses, and Dominic can see her hands trembling slightly despite her controlled posture. For 3 years I have lived in exile from my own people. Not physical exile, but something perhaps worse, present but invisible, tolerated but never accepted, contributing but never recognized. My scars, earned through action that saved 43 lives, have been interpreted by Sylvari culture as evidence of spiritual corruption. I have been told that my appearance reflects inner failure, that my survival with injury was somehow more shameful than noble death would have been. High Minister Thuron shifts uncomfortably, clearly unhappy with this public airing of cultural attitudes. But Sylvari custom demands the acknowledged party be allowed to speak without interruption during their response. Kaida continues, I accepted this judgment. I internalized the message that my worth was diminished by my appearance, that I should be grateful for even marginal tolerance from my people. I believed that courage and sacrifice mattered less than aesthetic harmony, that my technical expertise was secondary to my failure to maintain physical perfection. Her voice strengthens. Then Captain Kane made his preliminary acknowledgement. He did so publicly, risking his reputation and career. He did so knowing full consequences under Sylvari law. He did so after researching our customs carefully enough to invoke the rite properly. This was not ignorant mistake or political gesture. This was deliberate choice made by someone who looked past surface to see worth that others dismissed. She turns to address Dominic directly. You told me my scars represent courage and survival, that they tell a story you respect rather than shame you pity. In our private clarification meeting, you offered genuine acknowledgement without expectation or demand. You gave me choice while making clear your own sincerity. Kaida takes a breath, and Dominic sees tears forming despite her controlled expression. I have spent 3 years being told I am less valuable because of my appearance. that my injuries represent spiritual failure, that I should accept rejection as appropriate consequence of surviving imperfectly. Her voice drops but remains audible through the hall's acoustics. I choose to stop believing that message. I choose to see my scars as Captain Kane sees them, as evidence of courage rather than shame, as proof of strength rather than corruption, as marks of survival rather than spiritual failure. She speaks the formal acceptance phrase in Ritual Silvari. I accept this acknowledgement with full knowledge and clear intent. I bind myself to this right, and to the one who has seen worth where others saw only marred appearance. Let the sacred bond be sealed. The Silvari delegation erupts in shocked protest. High Minister Thuron stands, his voice cutting through the noise. This is a farce. The right of union requires spiritual harmony between parties. There can be no harmony with one who bears such obvious corruption. Dominic steps forward, speaking in the formal Silvari he's practiced. Honored Minister, respectfully, your culture's interpretation of physical appearance as reflection of spiritual state is philosophical position, not objective truth. Kaida's injuries represent her choice to save lives at personal cost. If your spiritual philosophy cannot honor such sacrifice, perhaps the philosophy requires examination rather than the person being rejected. You presume to lecture us on our own sacred beliefs. Thuron's fury is barely controlled. You desecrate our most sacred bonding ritual by treating it as vehicle for political statement. I treat it with utmost seriousness, Dominic replies calmly. I invoked the preliminary acknowledgement knowing full consequences. Kaida has accepted with clear knowledge of what she faces. We both choose to complete the rite despite opposition from both our peoples. That's not desecration. That's the deepest respect for a custom designed to unite worthy partners against external pressure. Ambassador Chen stands in the human delegation section. Her expression suggesting she's accepted this situation is beyond her control. The rite of union, once accepted by both parties, proceeds to completion according to Silvari law. Are there formal objections beyond philosophical disagreement? Several Silvari nobles stand, but their objections are procedural rather than substantive. They don't approve, but they cannot cite specific law that prevents interspecies right or that requires the acknowledged party meet particular aesthetic standards. The rite's ancient texts specify only that both parties must be of sound mind and clear intent, making acknowledgement publicly before witnesses. Dominic and Kaida have met these requirements. The rite of union ceremony proceeds over the next hours. A complex series of vows, symbolic gestures, and formal declarations that bind the two parties under Silvari law. Dominic speaks his vows in carefully practiced Silvari, promising partnership, protection, and genuine respect. Kaida responds with traditional acceptance phrases, her voice steady despite visible emotion. When the ceremonial leader, a neutral elder from a minor Silvari house, since major houses refuse to participate, asks for objections, High Minister Thuron makes one final attempt. I object on grounds that this human cannot possibly understand the sacred depth of these vows, and that Kaida of House Varys. He pauses deliberately before delivering the formal rejection. Kaida the Scarred accepts them out of desperation rather than genuine spiritual harmony. Kaida turns to address him directly, abandoning protocol to speak from personal conviction. Minister Thuron, I accept these vows from Captain Kane, because in 2 weeks he has shown me more genuine respect than my own people have offered in 3 years. He sees my courage where you see only corruption. He values my contributions where you note only my appearance. Her scarred features show both pain and determination. If that is desperation, it's desperation for basic recognition of worth beyond aesthetic judgment. And if Captain Kane's understanding of these vows lacks your spiritual depth, perhaps his straightforward sincerity is preferable to spiritual philosophy that justifies cruelty toward injury and survival. The elder ceremonial leader raises his hand. Objection is noted but insufficient to halt proceedings. The right of union is complete and binding. He turns to the assembled witnesses. Let it be recorded. Captain Dominic Kane of the Terran Coalition and Qaeda, formerly of House Varys, are bonded under sacred law, with all rights and obligations thereof. The Silvari delegation begins formal withdrawal from the hall, High Minister Thuron leading an exodus that leaves only a handful of minor House representatives who are either too junior to risk offending superiors by staying, or too genuinely moved by the ceremony to leave. Human delegation remains, though many look uncomfortable with the diplomatic fallout this will create. After the ceremony, in a brief moment of relative privacy in a side chamber, Qaeda and Dominic face each other as formally bonded partners. You've just permanently damaged your career and complicated human-Silvari relations, Qaeda says, though her tone suggests she's still processing that he actually completed the rite. You've just been formally exiled by your own people, Dominic counters. We're both dealing with consequences. Do you regret it? No, the answer comes immediately. Do you? Qaeda touches her scarred face, a gesture he's noticed she does when processing emotion. For 3 years I've believed my scars defined my worth, that surviving imperfectly was more shameful than dying beautifully, that I deserved rejection because my appearance disrupted aesthetic harmony. She looks at him directly. You've shown me different perspective, that these scars represent courage and strength, that survival matters more than perfect appearance, that someone can actually see worth in me beyond surface judgment. Then we both chose correctly. Dominic extends his hand again, and this time when Qaeda takes it, the touch is less tentative, the beginning of genuine partnership rather than formal obligation. The story concludes several months later. Dominic has resigned his military commission to accept civilian advisory position with the Terran Coalition's diplomatic corps, technically a demotion, but allowing him to continue meaningful work without the career trajectory his previous path would have required. Qaeda has established independent consulting firm specializing in engineering solutions for interspecies technical challenges. Her expertise finally recognized without the filter of Silvari cultural rejection. They live together on Haven's Rest, navigating the practical realities of interspecies partnership while building genuine relationship beyond the right that bound them. It's not always easy. Cultural differences create misunderstandings, and both still face judgment from their respective peoples. But they're learning each other through daily partnership. Dominic teaches Qaeda that her worth isn't determined by aesthetic standards, while Qaeda helps Dominic recognize that being valued for substance rather than appearance was what he'd been seeking all along. One evening, reviewing technical specifications for a joint human-Silvari project, relations have slowly improved, though formal diplomatic ties remain strained. Qaeda pauses to ask the question that's been on her mind. Do you ever regret it? Choosing me. You could have had uncomplicated life with someone your peers would celebrate. Instead, you have me, scarred, exiled, still learning to believe I'm worth respect. Dominic looks up from his work, his expression suggesting genuine confusion. Qaeda, you saved 43 lives through extraordinary courage. You maintained dignity despite years of rejection. You're brilliant enough to solve engineering problems multiple species can't crack. You're building a thriving independent career despite having no family support or cultural backing. He reaches across to take her scarred hand. Why would I regret partnering with someone extraordinary? The scars make you more beautiful, not less. They're proof you survived something terrible and came out stronger. You're the only person who sees them that way. Then everyone else is missing something obvious. He smiles. Besides, I'm selfishly grateful. If Silvari culture hadn't been foolish enough to reject you, I never would have had the chance to know you. Their loss, my gain. Qaeda's eyes shine with tears she's learned it's safe to show. I love you, she says, still somewhat tentative with the phrase, still learning to trust that it can be genuine. I love you too, Dominic replies simply. Scars and all. Especially the scars, actually. They tell my favorite story about you. They return to their work, two people building life together not despite their unusual beginning, but because of it. Outside their quarters, Haven's Rest continues its role as neutral ground where species meet and mingle. Inside, a warrior who learned to value substance over surface, and a survivor who learned she was worth more than aesthetic judgment discover that the best partnerships are often the ones that challenge both parties to see themselves and each other more clearly. Dominic never regrets invoking the right of union. Kaida never regrets accepting it. And slowly, through their example and through Kaida's growing reputation as an engineering innovator, even some Sylvari begin to question whether their aesthetic standards should carry more weight than actual courage and achievement. It's small progress, but it's progress, sparked by one man choosing to see worth where others saw only scars, and one woman finding the courage to believe him.